Hello everybody, I am here today to review the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy. And this trilogy is Spider-Man, Spider-Man 2, and Spider-Man 3. I don't know what setup you guys have for the disc. You might have the Blu-ray trilogy or whatever, but I have Spider-Man widescreen special edition, Spider-Man 2 full screen special edition, and then Spider-Man 3 widescreen presentation in the collector's case. I'm a big Spidey guy. Anywho, let's start up the review with the one that came first, of course. And here we have Spider-Man. And this movie has the PG-13 rating. And this is what got me into Spider-Man. It really was. It came out in 2002. It has a running time of 121 minutes. And this features the Spider-Man origin story and the Green Goblin. And this puts Peter Parker for the first time on the silver screen. And this was a very big deal back in the day. Now, keep in mind, I was like literally 5 years old. So I had no clue what was going on. I didn't see it in theaters. I saw it after it came out on DVD. So this is what got me into Spider-Man all those years back, and I've been into the character ever since. So this movie does have a lot of nostalgic value for me. But each time I go back and watch it, I notice the little things that kind of bug me. But here we go. The person who plays Peter Parker in this movie is Tobey Maguire. And I honestly think Tobey Maguire is an excellent actor for Spider-Man. He really does a good job. And Kirsten Dunst played Mary Jane. William Dafoe played Norman Osborn. James Franco played Harry Osborn. Rosemary Harris played Aunt May, and the music was by Danny Elfman, and the company was Sony Pictures, so it's still Sony doing the movies. The producers were Avi Arad and Stan Lee. So, yeah. And of course, as I've said many times before, it's directed by Sam Raimi. But let's get into this. This story is about a teenage kid learning about power and responsibility. And that only takes up the first 45 minutes of the film. That's the origin story. He gets bit by a spider. He starts wrestling to make money. He he decides not to stop a guy robbing the place, and then his uncle dies. Which is a really emotional story because it was the same guy who robbed the place that Peter could have stopped that killed his uncle. And that is a very unique take on the family member dying origin story, which we see in Batman and all that stuff, because this is directly Peter's fault. He didn't say pull the trigger, but he easily, by just sticking his foot out and tripping the guy, could have stopped the whole thing from happening. And after that, which one of the most emotional scenes in the movie is Peter Parker arrives at this crowd of people and then looks over and he finds his uncle on the ground with a gunshot wound, and then he holds Uncle Ben's hand as he dies. And the actors do a really good job here, because you could see Tobey Maguire's eyes tearing up. And then he goes out, puts on his wrestling costume, and hunts down the killer. And the one problem I found that some people actually have is when he finds the guy and the guy falls out the window, Peter looks a lot like a murderer. I mean, it didn't look like he pushed him from the way the camera was going, but he seemed quite satisfied with himself after it happened. Anywho, after all that, we see some stuff going on with Willem Dafoe testing a drug on himself because he's desperate for money, not say he's crazy, and the drug gives him superpowers and drives him absolutely insane and he loses his job. Kinda sucks to be him. So his plan is get the Goblin gear and kill the board of directors that fired him. Yeah. And he actually achieves this goal. He kills them, and Spidey barely manages to save the people that were actually in danger, and barely manages to defeat Goblin by damaging his glider as the Goblin tumbles on his glider out of the way. So, yeah. And I don't get what the Goblin's goal after that is. I mean, did he want revenge on Spider-Man for stopping him? Because Spidey didn't stop him. He very clearly killed those people. So, I don't know. But the action sequences were very good for 2002. Of course, the CGI and stuff isn't nearly as good as it is today, but what are you gonna do? That was 10 years ago. And the ending scene with Green Goblin and Spider-Man, that was the darkest part of the movie for me, because the Green Goblin makes a last minute play to kill Spider-Man, and if it doesn't work, he kills himself. I mean, how desperate must you be in that situation? And then his dying words, "Don't tell Harry." Wow. And it really seems interesting because Norman didn't seem to like his son that much less be proud of him. But anywho, I give the first Spider-Man movie a 8.5 out of 10. And on to Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man 2, as everyone knows, is the golden child of this trilogy. It is the best movie in the trilogy by far. And if you don't agree with me, go watch Spider-Man 3, which I'll get to later. And the villain in this movie, Dr. Octopus, is very well done. His motives are believable, due to the fact that he was a scientist who was trying to create a fusion project to help the world, and it fails. A bunch of people are put in danger and his wife dies. And the tentacles are kind of infused to him, and the inhibitor chip that prevents the AI from screwing with his head is broken. And he's really left a man with nothing. And the world thinks he's a psychopath. And he's thinking, what am I going to do? So he tries to rebuild his life through it because he thinks he knows how to fix it, or if he makes it better and bigger, better, faster. if he makes it bigger, it'll make it more stable. So he's trying to rob money and stuff to get the materials necessary to do it. And while he's doing that, Peter Parker is kind of dealing with his own thing. And it's not like, boom, Dr. Octopus is a psychopath. We got to know him. Peter Parker and him were friends during this whole thing. And I really liked that angle. It kind of, you could tell that Peter felt bad for him, I think. But Peter was dealing with his own stuff at the time. And just in case you're wondering, Alfred Molina played Dr. Octopus. And Peter's dealing with his own stuff. His life is kind of thrown into chaos with the whole dual identity thing going along. and he's late for everything. His friend thinks he's kind of unreliable. He lost his job at the pizza place. He's barely making money at the Daily Bugle. Can barely pay the rent to his apartment. And he kind of hates being Spider-Man. And he loses his powers. And a lot of people think this is overly convenient. I don't know. I mean, think about it. If you get a headache and you keep thinking, oh, I have a headache, this sucks, the headache is going to progressively get worse and worse and worse. Only because you're concentrating on it. But if you go and do stuff and other stuff, it'll go away and you won't even notice. So, I don't know. Maybe the mind over matter thing somehow impacted his powers. I don't know how it worked. I'm not an expert on genetic engineering spider people. But I found that was kind of interesting, and he realizes that he can't be happy with not being Spider-Man because he'll just feel guilty for not helping the people that he easily could have helped. So he becomes Spider-Man again, tells Mary Jane that he can't be with her because he doesn't want to put her in danger, and stops Dr. Octopus. And then the ending where Dr. Octopus dies. Oh, come on, the movie's been out for 8 years now. If you didn't know this, you've been living under a rock. It's really emotional because he says, I will not die a monster. And that's very redeeming to me, I think. And it really do feel like it continues the thing about a central theme in the Spider-Man that this trilogy has with each movie, and the theme in this one was redemption. Doc Ock redeeming himself, Peter Parker redeeming himself, etc., etc., etc. I am going to give... Oh yeah, and Spider-Man 2, if you didn't know this, was the best superhero movie until these big blockbusters that we're seeing all the time came along. All in all, oh yeah, the movie's 128 minutes. I try to remember to... Well, now I'm trying to remember to say how long the movie is when I'm doing these movie reviews. By the way, this is my first movie review. Be sure to tell me how it turns out. And the next one is what many people consider to be the Batman and Robin of the Spider-Man movies. And since I have a lot to say on this movie, it will be continued in part 2. See you then.